Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I hope I'm audible. If someone can give me like a thumbs up. Wonderful. Thank you, Suzanne. It's great to have everyone here. We are gathered here on Zoom. We're also live streaming on YouTube Live. A reminder here to, if we haven't already done so, to mute ourselves out. We can keep our cameras on or off as we feel more comfortable. Perhaps taking a moment here to more intentionally ground ourselves in our seat, finding that comfortable posture, that comfortable seat, that seat that allows us to be present and aware and alert. Taking perhaps another moment or two to allow our bodies to settle, elongating the spine perhaps, loosening or softening any areas of the body that feel particularly constricted or tight this afternoon. We can go ahead and close our eyes or soften our gaze if we haven't already done so. We'll begin as we generally do with the ringing of the bell, and then 3 deep breaths in, holding the breath and then releasing the breath. And when we do this, some folks find it helpful to count the beats to pace the breath. So if it's helpful to you, we'll breathe in softly and with intention through the nostrils or softly between the lips for about 4 beats. We'll hold the breath for about 4 beats, and then we will release the breath for perhaps 5 or 6 beats, just elongating the breath on the exhale a little bit more, allowing us to be a little bit more grounded in our practice and perhaps a little bit more expansive within. Breathing in deeply. Hold. And out. Again, breathing in. Holding. Releasing. One final deep breath in. Hold. And out. Continuing to breathe through. We don't want to hold the breath. And at the same time, allowing the breath to return to its own pace and its own rhythm. Some teachers call this allowing the breath to settle, to find itself. And as we do this, continuing to practice awareness, noticing the breath, simply observing it. Observing the sensation of air flowing in, observing perhaps that slightest of moments between inhalation and exhalation, and noticing that feeling of release, that sensation of expelling the air out, of breathing out. Continuing to observe the breath without judgment, without even analysis or categorizing. Just noticing the breath for what it is in this moment. Noticing, even as we continue to observe the breath, any other sensations or stimuli around us. Noticing any sounds in our environment. Perhaps the sound of footsteps or voices, if we're in a space that's occupied by others. Perhaps the sound of rain hitting against the glass of our window, or perhaps sounds of traffic or machinery outside, or the hum of our air conditioners or our laptops, whatever sounds there may be around us, simply noticing them. When we notice sounds, it's different than being distracted by them, because we're directing our awareness with intention and recognizing their presence. And choosing now to return our awareness to the breath. With that same intention. We don't have to pretend that the other sounds or sights, the other sensations are not there. It's not denying them. It's recognizing and choosing to direct our intention and attention to the breath. to this moment. If we feel our minds, our thoughts, or even our senses being pulled elsewhere, we can simply guide them back to our anchor, to our breathing. Meditation is not about eliminating the distractions as much as perhaps it's an opportunity to release the holds that the distractions have on us, to coexist with the distractions, to withstand the distractions, by practicing presence and rooting ourselves. Right now, the breath is our anchor, but if we'd like, we can embrace an affirmation, or if it's part of our practice, even a sacred chant or syllable, a mantra, as our anchor. Whatever is accessible to us, bringing our awareness, bringing our thoughts and our attention back to the anchor. As we approach these final moments, this final minute or two of our practice together, we can stay right here, or if we'd like, with intention and gentleness, we can try to deepen our connection to our anchor. For some of us, this might mean a purposeful deepening of the breath, or simply a metaphoric leaning in with more attention, more closely leaning in to the breath, to our anchor. We can fill the space of our breath and the space between our breaths with expansiveness and depth and intention. We'll close this session or sit with one final deep breath in together, holding and then releasing the breath, chanting or simply hearing with openness the sacred syllable Om, the sound of the universal and infinite. Breathing in. Om. Gently and in a way that feels comfortable to us, we can open the eyes or widen the gaze, returning our attention to our virtual gathering and to our external surroundings. Wonderful. Thank you again for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So we'll have a short wisdom teaching following along this theme of withstanding distractions. Hope everyone can see the screen okay. So our reflection for today is that we can learn to withstand the distractions and cravings of the mind. When we talk about distractions, We really mean both the external distractions, the things we typically think of as distractions, but also the cravings, the wanderings, even the restlessness of the mind. So external and internal distractions. We can learn to withstand them by becoming like the ocean, expansive, deep, and dynamic. This metaphor of the ocean is found in the Bhagavad Gita in the second chapter, the 70th shloka or verse. A very powerful, beautiful metaphor that's used. Apuryamanam achala pratishtham samudram apaha pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sashantim apnoti na kama kami. Sri Krishna teaches Arjuna, just as the ever-filled ocean remains steady and undisturbed, although waters constantly flow into it from every side, one who remains undisturbed by the constant flow of distractions and cravings experiences peace within, not the one who strives to fulfill those cravings. Nakamakami. So what is the nature of the ocean? Right? When we think of the ocean, we can imagine, of course, it's very beautiful. It's very majestic. It often is awe-inspiring. If you've had the experience, as I hope most of us have had, the experience of gazing out, perhaps from the shore or on a boat, a vessel of some sort, gazing out at the expansiveness, the vastness of the ocean. There's something really breathtaking about it, right? It's in its vastness and um, it kind of, it speaks to, it evokes this idea of infinite possibility. And then also there's the depth of the ocean, right? When we think of the ocean, we think of that depth. Other bodies of water, perhaps they can be shallow or deep, but with the ocean, it evokes this idea of almost limitless depth, again, harkening back to this idea of the infinite. So almost instinctively, I think we're drawn to the ocean as this almost mystical manifestation of infinite, of that which is limitless. And here Krishna offers this as a teaching point, as a reflection point, that just as we are so awed by the ocean, what can we learn from the ocean? What can we fold into our own practice, our own intentionality, our own state of being, that can allow us to, as the ocean, as Krishna says in the analogy, as the ocean is able to withstand the flow, the constant flowing in from these other bodies of water, from the rivers and streams that all end up merging into the ocean. How can we learn to withstand and maintain our stability in the face of so many ever-changing circumstances, distractions, and cravings? So there's three characteristics that I'd like to offer for us to reflect on. Of course, there's so many ways we can look at the ocean, but these three especially spoke to me, and I wanted to share as three lessons that we can learn from the ocean, three qualities that we can emulate from the ocean. The ocean is dynamic. Krishna speaks about the stillness of the ocean, but we usually think about the ocean in terms of movement. But there's no, I don't think it's a contradiction. It's maybe an apparent paradox, but there is stillness amidst constant flow. So when we talk about the nature of the ocean, we're talking about a kind of dynamic balance, right? There's a static balance, but there's also dynamic balance. And so when we think about the ocean, we can learn this lesson of dynamic balance, of stillness and stability, not not by eliminating flow, but amidst constant flow, right? This is the nature of the ocean. And of course, how does the ocean do this? How does the ocean maintain this stability amidst the constant flow? There are two more lessons that contribute to this. First, we can say that the ocean, its vastness, its expanse, its expansive nature, which allows it to do this, right? Well, if we have, a very small pond, that pond is going to be disturbed by any change, practically speaking. The smaller the pond, the more its volatility and its likelihood to be disturbed. But what allows the ocean to remain undisturbed, to remain steady and still and constant and fixed amidst the constant flow? In fact, what allows the ocean to take in the flow rather than be disturbed by it is its expansiveness, right? The bigger, the wider, the more expansive we are in an analogous way, the more that we can withstand these distractions, we can engage with them, and we can allow that flow to pass through and to pass out, right? But it requires a certain kind of expansiveness, a certain widening of our perspective, a certain enlargement that takes place. We can think about this even physically with the breath. When we practice breath work, part of what we're practicing is a kind of an expansiveness that happens on the physiological level, but also that happens on the psychological, emotional, and ultimately on the spiritual level. And of course, when we learn from the ocean, we learn from its depth. Where are all those waves and all that movement and all of that kind of volatility taking place is closer to the surface, right? But if we can go beyond the surface, if we can dive deep into the ocean, what do we find? As we see in this image here, we find more stability, we find more stillness, right? So those very volatile waves that we can experience in our own lives, the waves of distraction, the waves of the volatility of our own minds, our own thoughts, our constantly being pulled into the past or being pushed into the anxiety of the future, right? All of that happens when we identify very strongly, and it can really knock us off course when we identify very strongly on the surface level with our superficial engagement, our superficial identities. But when we learn to cultivate, and it's a process, but when we learn to cultivate depth and connect to that deeper aspect of who we are, we're able to recognize those waves on the surface, but we're able to dive deeper into a place of stability. And so this very simple, short lesson of the ocean is an invitation. And I'd like to leave you with this invitation to take stock, that we can take stock of in our own lives. Are we cultivating, or how are we cultivating dynamic balance? Recognizing and engaging in a healthy way with this constant flow while maintaining our own stability, our own equilibrium. So dynamic balance, expanding our perspective, learning to cultivate that expansive perspective, that expansive mind, that expansive consciousness, even on the physical and physiological level, the expansive breath that will allow us to practice more and more resilience and more of that ability to withstand and not be controlled by and pulled and pushed by the distractions. And of course, all of this pointing towards cultivating our depth of inner life, right? How are we taking the time as an act of self-care and self-compassion and self-awareness, taking the time to cultivate that inner life rather than remaining always in the superficial, on the surface level? So again, our reflection for today: we can learn to withstand the distractions and cravings of the mind by becoming more like the ocean, expansive, deep, and dynamic. So thank you all for joining us for our Shanti in Place weekly virtual meditation. Very happy to stay on a little bit longer if anyone has any questions or would like to share any reflections or thoughts. Otherwise, we will see you hopefully next week for our next installment of Shanti in Place.
I haven't meditated in forever, and like that. But
Oh yeah, your body, your mind is used to it now.
well,
You get into it,
it's been forever.
but it doesn't matter. Your mind knows how to. Your mind knows it. That's where the interesting part is. And that's why I say, like, you do it with little kids, and then they don't do it for forever, and then they're all of a sudden not when they do it.
Well, you knew that I learned it in college.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And thank you all for being here. We will see you next week. Have a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week.